read it, so we're going to have to look at it then. Greetings to their brothers, the Jews of Egypt. From their brothers, the Jews in Jerusalem. That's already a very low-key greeting. And where would this letter then have been found if it was a letter from the Jews of Jerusalem, or they didn't even call it Judea, they called it Jerusalem, which makes a lot of sense to me, because I don't think Judea, or whatever you want to call it, extended very much outside the confines of Jerusalem. Same Jerusalem that the Israeli government is getting ready to negotiate back to some other folks in the next couple of months, because the Bush administration wants a victory somewhere in the Middle East. And they have a lame duck prime minister in Israel who wants to make a name for himself and has no backing anywhere. But if he can get himself a treaty, maybe he'll look good. In the meantime, he's going to cough up stuff that will never be able to be taken back in an official way for another 2 millennia. These are really fateful moments in the history of these matters, if you're interested in them, that we're watching. Everyone's so bored with it and fed up with it. No one's paying any attention to it. Anyway, the Jews of Jerusalem, in the country of Judea, and the country of Judea. So that really sounds pretty good. May God prosper you, remembering his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, his faithful servants. May he give you all a heart to worship him and do his will with a generous and a willing spirit. By the way, mine may differ from yours, but this is good enough, you know. May he open your hearts to the laws and the precepts, or the laws and the ordinances, if you don't want. So once again, to the law, to his law, and to his law and the ordinance. So once again, the Mosaic law is not as Paul describes it in Corinthians, in 2 Corinthians 2 to 3. You remember that section where he has Moses? I told you about that section, right? We went through that one section where he has Moses as a charlatan. Did we do that? Well, let me just do it quick in case you've forgotten it. Let's see if I'll find it here quickly. And I've got so many different Bibles that it's hard for me. I like to make it clear. We did the Galatians material, but in 2 Corinthians, I think he says, ending in, he's going around Macedonia in 2:13 of 2 Corinthians. We are Christ's incense to God for those who are being saved, and so on. Does this sound like a new attempt, chapter 3, to commend ourselves? Because the problem in 2 Corinthians is Paul doesn't have any letters of recommendation from the Jerusalem leadership. So he's got to find more spiritual, esoteric, or allegorical ways of recommending themselves. Unlike other letter people, we don't need letters of recommendation. To be an apostle, theoretically, you were supposed to have a letter from James. That's what's behind what he's talking about here. We consider this an authentic letter of Paul. I to you, because you yourselves are our letter. Here's the spiritualization going forward, the metaphorical presentation of things, the allegorical thing I told you about in Galatians 4. It's the same spirit, so it's the same person probably writing it. I think that's pretty obvious. Either to you or from you, because you are our letter written on your hearts, that anyone can see and read. And it's plain you are a letter from Christ, drawn up by us, written not with ink. He's very eloquent. But with the Spirit of the living God, not, and here it is, not on stone tablets. So he's attacking the stone tablets, the law of Moses. Now these people have just written a letter in Egypt. That's why I'm telling you about these things, recommending to keep his law. So you see, it's exactly the opposite of what they are involved in. But on the tablets of your living heart. All of this is very good if you like literature and if you're interested in imagery, but it wouldn't go down to people who care about the law. Anyway, this is the way he presents himself, and I don't have time to do the whole thing. He is the one who has given us the qualification to be the administrators of the new covenant. The new covenant will be in the scrolls, which is not a covenant of written letters, not the law of Moses, but of the Spirit. I teach spiritual things spiritually, Paul says. So the law of Moses is gone by the boards. I don't mind. I have no truck for the law of Moses personally, in the sense that I don't keep all of the aspects of it. But I'm trying to give you the Spirit. You see, he then goes on to say, which is really one of the greatest insults one religion ever said about another, the written letters which bring death, but the Spirit gives life. So the law of Moses, the two tablets, they bring death. But what he's talking, of course, symbolically too. He wants to say that that's the ministry of death. But all this, if you read this, of course, you will get a negative feeling about the law of Jews and so on and so forth. You just can't help it. So, I mean, the 2 millennium of this has had a horrifying effect, both of the people who are on the one side of it and the people on the other side of it. Because the people on the other side of it have had to face this, and they've developed some characteristics maybe that people who have to face this kind of treatment and mindset develop. You know, it gets very tough for their children. Now, if the ministry of death in the written letters engraved on stones, have you got any doubt what he's talking about? The 10 Commandments, was accompanied by such a brightness that the Israelites could not bear looking on the face of Moses. Where's that? In the desert, when Moses goes into the tent of meeting in Exodus and other books, he comes out irradiated because he's in God's presence, supposedly. And that's what Paul is talking about, those passages where he comes out. And so he had to put a veil over his face. Why in the Old Testament did Moses have to put a veil over his face? So that other people wouldn't be irradiated and burned when they came near him in his presence, because he'd been in the presence of God, in theory, and therefore his face was shining with radiation. Now, look, I admit this was literary. I'm not claiming that this is absolute historical truth any more than the other is, okay? This is what I mean by literary documents, but still, it's precious to the people who possess it, okay? So they think that that's like saying, what's going to happen here is like saying that the covenant of Moses is actually the covenant of Hagar and Sinai. Where's that? Galatians 4. The covenant of the slave woman, and therefore cast out the slave woman. We're the free people because we are the free wife, not the slave wife, and so on and so forth. It's more of the allegorical